one thing that's helpful for me is to think about this concept of wicked problems. And it's not wicked in the sense of evil. It's wicked in the sense of kind of intractable. So most social problems that require a great number of people to change their mindsets and behavior wind up being wicked problems. And there tend to be a lot of the things that we really care about and are motivated by. Right? None of us work in the public interest for pecuniary reasons or because it delivers glory or power necessarily, but we're, I think, fundamentally motivated by social problems. And a lot of these problems are really deeply intractable. And some of the characteristics of their intractability in this wicked problems sort of heuristic is that there's rarely a single definition of what the problem is. So if you're talking about poverty, poverty in East Los Angeles is very different from poverty in Sierra Leone. It's very different from poverty in the Philippines and some other contexts. There's usually no clear sense of what is a success or a failure because a lot of these problems, if you're talking about inequality, it's related to political instability, it's related to education, it's related to global climate change. They're all deeply interrelated. It's not like a math problem or a science problem where there's a true or false answer to these problems, but there are ways forward that are better and there are ways backward that are worse. So in terms of how you think about these problems, it's also different than how you might think about a lot of kinds of problems. Typically, for wicked problems, there's no best practice or template that says you can take this and apply this in this context, this context, and this context. But you have to think much more flexibly. You have to think in terms of different kinds of explanations, and you have to, again, think about the ways in which these issues are all interrelated. And you have to avoid the temptation to try to look for a magic bullet, to try to look for a technical solution. And one of the keys is that with these kinds of issues, there are sort of incremental approaches you can take, but you would be risking a lot to assume that you can just do trial and error. Because every time you really try to intervene, you're shifting the nature of the problem itself. And from where you sit, usually you'll have an opportunity to try to make a difference, and you'll have to be very strategic about when you try to do that. Because when you try to do that, you're going to change the nature of the problem itself. So that's a key thing to have to keep in mind. So this is just reiterating a point that I made just now. Is some of the problems that we care about really do have something like a technical solution. But most problems are much more complex. So that my daughter said I was writing a children's book. So this is just a schematic, and schematics sometimes help. You might think of all the problems out there, some of them really wind up becoming represented in interests, either the interests of the public or the interests of organizations. And for those issues, there's often a fierce politics around it. Sometimes there's more of a consensual kind of sunny politics around it, but there's some kind of politics around it, and then sometimes policies emerge from that. And then there's also all sorts of feedbacks, right? So sometimes once you make policies, those policies wind up creating new problems. Sometimes when you make policies, they wind up creating new interests, new constituencies that feed into a different kind of politics. So that's a broad schematic. And then more often than not, I think, when there are problems, there are big roadblocks that get in the way. And a lot of times, people think about the roadblocks in terms of policy-making communities themselves. And part of what I want to talk about is the way of thinking about using public opinion, activated public opinion, as a way around some of those roadblocks. So another way of looking